There's this element of people finding new ways to make parts.
Oh, yeah, the pie is getting bigger.
The pie is getting bigger. And it's funny when people ask me what I do. It's supposed, I write about sheet metal fab, and usually how I describe it is I just point to some sheet metal part that's usually in the room or like in the elevator. See, this is all sheet metal. Oh, I didn't even know.
Mark your calendars. The 31st Advanced Laser Applications Workshop will take place from June 25th to the 27th at the Suburban Collection Showcase in Novi, Michigan. This event connects manufacturers and suppliers in automotive, aerospace, agriculture, and the fabrication spaces. Enjoy 3 days of presentations from leading experts, cutting-edge demonstrations, and fascinating open houses. Discover the latest advancements and applications that are shaping the future of the industry. Visit fmamfg.org to learn more.
Hello, welcome to the Fabricator Podcast. We have a special guest today in Caleb Chamberlain from OSH Cut out in Utah. He's going to share some details about his business and kind of the unique way he's approaching metal fabricating. But we also have another special guest. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Dan.
Tim Heston from the Fabricator. Straight out of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Tim did a feature on OSH Cut how long ago? 2 years ago?
2 years ago. 2 years ago. And Gareth sent me the lead. Gareth was online, and I had actually seen OSH Cut's ad and OSH Cut's content online before that. And I thought, that may be another quote aggregator or some other online service that contracted with other shops that did the heavy lifting. And so I was like, let me just click on this. And I clicked on it. I'm like, wait a minute, you can upload a file, and this should. Wait a minute, they've got lasers.
Yeah,
they've got brakes. And and at the time I covered several other quote web shops, one in Europe and one in the United States that have online ordering systems, instant quoting. And this guy kind of went a step further with DFM services that I had not seen before, especially with the bending simulation. So we put him on the cover in 2 months. We were like, man, this is something else.
Yeah.
This is something. And so he's a unique character. He's open. He shares what he's learned, what his mistakes are, and now he has a monthly column in the magazine, Tech Talk.
He's sharp, and if you've ever read the column, he tackles not just kind of boring everyday life in a shop type stuff, but putting in new equipment. A great conversation a while back about digital advertising from his perspective. So, the conversation is going to be really good. I'd like to thank Gareth for taking time out of his morning from live betting English Premier Football to find this for Tim. Yes. So, congratulations.
Wait.
Don't worry. He's on a performance improvement plan. He's good.
Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, our guest, no need for, he's always improving. You'll enjoy the conversation with Caleb. Thanks.
If you're involved in the pipe and tube industry, you won't want to miss the Pipe and Tube Conference this May in Omaha, Nebraska. This event is an excellent opportunity to connect with industry experts, stay up to date with the latest technologies, and explore new business opportunities. You'll leave the conference with a wealth of knowledge and new connections to help your business succeed. So mark your calendar and join us in Omaha for the Pipe and Tube Conference. Register today at fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Today's guest is Caleb Chamberlain of OSH Cut, not OSH Cut, as I was corrected last week, so apologies there.
We get everything.
Even though you weren't there, I'll apologize.
Oshkosh.
Yeah.
Oshkosh.
You might be familiar with Caleb. He writes, not only have we done a story on him, I guess when did you first write that?
Was it 2 years ago, I think?
Yeah,
right before it was like in 2019, 2020.
So we've invited Caleb to write a column for us each month called Tech Talk, and he's provided some really nice discussion points as well as kind of an inside look at his shop. So we'll probably talk a little about some of those topics that were covered in some of those columns. But before we get started, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into the metal fabricating field?
Yeah, it's kind of a meandering journey, I guess. I have a master's degree in electrical engineering, been writing software for my whole career. Started a company making autopilots, actually in college, and went from there to do, work for a radar company, actually doing long range RFID localization type stuff. And then I went to a medical devices company. And during that time period, my brother and I were always pursuing kind of side projects, making stuff, almost always required fabricated metal. And we're having a hard enough time sourcing parts locally that we thought, hey, let's see if we can fix this. Let's make it easier. And that was, in a nutshell, the genesis of OSH Cut. I sent him a text one day and said, hey, we should buy a laser. And that was kind of the genesis of the whole project. We thought, yeah, we'll just, we'll run jobs on the weekends to pay for it. And then the rest of the time, we'll just do our own stuff. And of course, that's not what happened at all.
I'm sorry. What were some of the side stuff you were working on during that time?
Yeah, I made mechanical clocks. I had my autopilot company where we needed to thermally calibrate sensors like rate gyros and accelerometers. And so we needed to gimbal a cryogenic temperature chamber. And we would use liquid nitrogen to cool it down, and then had heating elements inside. And meanwhile, it's spinning around and rotating. Yeah. So we built that. We were building a virtual reality motion simulator. So you're sitting on this actuated chair basically, and you've got a VR headset on, and you're, HOTAS joystick and throttle, and you're flying around and you're moving with it.
Wow.
So we built that. We built a few versions of that. It was all fabricated metal tube. But basically we would spin a design, and then we'd be like, oh man, now we have to order this. Ordering it was the hard part, right? And for good reason. It's the kind of work that nobody wants to do because it's really high mix, tons of parts that they'll never see again.
Right. It's yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned all right, you texted your brother a laser, but the real story is, okay, you texted your brother a laser, but then tell me the software story, because that's obviously what sets you guys apart.
Yeah, and it's very much influenced by software because I come from, I'm an electrical engineer. I've designed and made circuit boards for my whole career. And in that industry, you can just get online, upload your design files, and have it on your doorstep next day. And there's 100 vendors that do that. And one of our inspirations was this company called OSH Park that does that with PCBs, printed circuit boards. And they do precisely what we do. And we've expanded beyond that in pretty major ways since then. But yeah, you upload your Gerbers, you have all your design review right there in your web browser, you place order and you get it, pretty quickly. So we wanted to mirror that for sheet metal, and that's what we've done.
Yeah.
And what were the initial steps in getting that software off the ground to actually make it usable for laser and then for forming?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So our V1 app, we launched end of 2018, and honestly, it was horrible. It was so bad. In fact, I remember watching the server logs and being so embarrassed as somebody uploaded one file at a time for 100 different unique parts. And then the way we had it set up originally, you couldn't change it after you added it to your cart. So they did it again to try it with a different material over the course of an hour and a half. And I was just so embarrassed that the workflow was that bad that within 6 months we had a V2 out that let you do batch uploads, And now, the biggest job we've done was 650 unique bent parts, quantity one of every one of them.
No
and
kidding.
Our system allowed that to happen without too much pain. So,
that's exciting.
Yeah. And kind of bring me through the development of that especially because you have nesting in your automated quoting, right? So that's a key point. So kind of bring me through that as far as how that came to be.
Yeah, that was another embarrassment, right? That people would submit these orders and I would look at them and be like, oh man, we overbid on material for this job. And, some have argued that, hey, they're willing to pay for it, so you should just be glad for the extra margin. But that's not the way we want to operate, really. We want to offer a competitive service and make the right amount for the right job for the service we provide. And so we built an engine that says, the first step at checkout. So it does kind of a first pass and says, based on the shape of this part, I think it's going to cost this much. Then the first step at checkout, it nests it. And if there's additional material savings, it subtracts it off the total. And, every fab shop does that. It's a person doing it,
Mm-hmm.
And we needed to be competitive with a fab shop that's been in business for decades, right? So for us, that was pretty important.
How do you stay up on top of variables that affect like some of the quoting within your system?
Yeah, like material prices especially with all the volatility, it's been a challenge. But essentially what we do is, we'll issue POs to our vendors, we record the price, and this is all in our system that we've developed. And then we have a process that runs periodically and just syncs everything up and says, okay, material's this now. And we stock little enough, it's not a big risk.
Right.
We do, 12 inventory turns a year.
Yeah.
So sometimes we might lose a little bit if the prices increase or drop or whatever. Yeah.
So when did you guys bring forming into the picture?
That was a good, like the day we launched our cutting service, people were already asking about bending. So we knew it was going to be something we needed. We actually went out and bought an old manual press brake and started doing jobs, and immediately we were like, okay,
they're not gonna do it.
That's the story from a lot of people.
Yeah, there's no way we can do this at scale with so many jobs. And it was like hand crank type stuff.
Like a leaf brake?
Yeah, you'd move the back edge with hand cranks, then
wonderful.
How long did you do that for?
we did one job. It was a kind of a bigger job. We made a bunch of like custom hanger brackets and G90 galvanized steel for they're building a house, right? And that was enough. It was like, it took us 30 minutes to set this up and set the depth stop on the ram.
Wow.
And then we thought, we just can't do this. So we sold that, got rid of it. It was probably 2019, maybe early 2020. We bought a Mitsubishi press brake with, nice servo-driven rams and this stuff. It's actually a Murata.
Yeah.
Apparently Mitz brought Murata, who knew.
Right.
But that made all the difference to have that nicer machine.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, the software story, because did you have simulation at the get-go, or how did that
No,
come
we
in?
didn't. And again, this was, so for anybody who's listening that doesn't know, we expose all of the manufacturability checks on the front end. So someone uploads a 3D model, our system unfolds it. This is the state now. It wasn't always this way. And then it refolds it on our tools, and it applies all the bend deductions and stuff. So our system can tell if it can't be made, and if it can't be made, it shows the user and says, look, it collides with the die, or you can't get the punch in there. And or there's no gauging surface. That's another thing we check for. And it just tells them, and it doesn't accept the work. And we see a lot of people iterate on their designs until we can make it. Which is kind of cool to see. They'll upload it like 10 times and then finally place an order, and you can see all the ways they've changed it.
How many people would love that at other shops in terms of just not having to kind of do that.
Oh, yeah. The back and forth is unreal because there's just so much that has to be communicated. And honestly, I have so much respect for other shops that figure that out and manage to do it, because it's hard. You go back and forth with an engineer for like 2 weeks, and maybe you don't even win that bid.
Right.
Maybe they're doing the same thing with another shop, and they're just trying to figure out how to design for a set of tools that you have, and you're just trying to be profitable.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a hard problem, but
well, the great thing about the system, because of course I've toyed with like, wow, this is amazing. Is that you don't have prints, right? You don't. People
and that
load up the.
There were some real. We talked about that yesterday, right? And there were some looks like, what? Are you serious? How do you operate without prints, right?
Right. But they upload the file, and then they adjust to your spec, and that's how it goes through your pipeline.
Yeah, and that's how the circuit board industry is as well. Is that manufacturers publish what they can do, and you don't have to dig, you don't have to call them and ask. You go, there's a capabilities page that says here's the stuff, and if you design around this, then we can make your stuff. So for sheet metal, it's kind of similar. There's, we know what our bend radii, we know the correct bend deductions, and we apply those, but you're still going to have stacking tolerance errors if you have to gauge off a bent surface, for example. And you're still going to have slight variation in bend radius, whether you're with grain or cross grain on the bend or whatever. And we kind of expect our customers to know sheet metal.
Yeah.
It's very self-serve. So they get on, they see it form together, and if they design something that requires 1,000th tolerance across 4 bends, they're going to be disappointed. But we don't see a lot of that. Like honestly, our customers are usually very happy with.
Have you
Right.
seen
get.
the user or the user of your software, your customer? Do you get a good feel in terms of what type of company person they are? Are they kind of hobbyists like you were back in the day?
It's
and to describe what you were describing earlier as hobby stuff is an insult, so I apologize for that.
But it was
we used to
very
talk
much
with
a
people that
hobby.
do like metal
Hobby.
flowers and like plasma cut art and building.
Sometimes.
What was the phrase you used?
I know.
Gyroscopes and cryogenic chambers. So yeah.
He needs to grow a ponytail for that to happen. But anyway.
So yeah, like has your user base kind of changed, customer base, or is it kind of stayed similar?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll serve everybody. Anybody who can upload a part that passes our DFM, we'll make the part, and that's been fine. But that's not where we make our money. Hobbyists is not where we do cut a lot of hobbyist stuff, but all like 99% of our revenue is all B2B.
Yeah. I just like from a demographic standpoint, I think people of a certain age probably like that type of like automated interaction.
Right.
And not to minimize relationships in this industry, but
They-
there's
they-
also people
Yeah,
that
yeah.
prefer just kind of I don't want to call it anonymous, but transactional type things. They just need stuff now, and which is a common theme in this industry.
Well, they grew up with Amazon, right? So it's
Yeah,
it's
well,
that
You've
that
said-
same thing.
you use that phrase, yeah.
But what I find especially fascinating is the and we didn't talk about it at the conference yet, but I'd like to get into it, is the marketing aspect.
Oh,
Because
that's a sore spot, right?
yeah, because at this conference, a lot of CEOs, a lot of fab shops. We just heard Todd Ludlow, he's a master sales guy.
Making cold calls, right?
Yeah, making cold
yeah.
calls, and just that totally different culture of sales. But now for you, it's SEO, optimization. Describe how your marketing machine works.
It's 100% digital ads. We have no sales team at all. We've got a guy who kind of fractionally helps us manage our digital ads campaigns. We've done some pretty interesting data analytics and stuff too. One of my columns talks about it. Because you can do some really cool optimization stuff in that space if you're willing to spend the money to collect the data.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll spend, I guess we're on track right now to do $90,000 a month on digital ads. And it's worth it. It's a lot more expensive now than it used to be. Like in September last year, it's like Google flipped a switch.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden our cost doubled for the same and slightly worse results. So that's a challenge, is that it can get crowded fast, it can get expensive fast, and that's the funnel, right?
Right. But it's optimal for you because that's your audience. They're looking for somebody to make parts. They're coming in. They don't have relationships built. They're not calling Joe down the street. They need somebody, and they need it fast. And they assume, if I need something fast, I'll go to the internet. And so that's how it works with you guys. So I think it's and what kind of analytics do you what metrics do you measure for your marketing campaigns? Like, all right, make sure, hey, this ad did well. Why and why not?
Yeah, there's a lot more we can do there, and we need to be more sophisticated about it as far as like optimizing copy and so on. But the challenge is there's so many variables. It's hard to know why something changed.
Yeah.
This September change, it's like, well, is there less demand? Probably. Did Google change their algorithm? Probably.
Yeah.
Do we have more competitors? Yeah. People, bid on our brand name. And so the way Google works, they'll put like 4 ads above organic results. So if someone searches for OSH Cut, we have to pay, like $20 a click if we want to be the top result on Google.
Wow.
Yeah, it's actually wild.
Mm-hmm.
But we just came back from a conference where, the goal of Google is to provide the answer. They're going to make it a little bit harder for those people who want those visits to their website because they know they're the only place really to go. And
if they can scrape it off your site and then
just present that little
platform,
summary if the question is that pointed. It's a challenge. So
and they're very much a
our
monopoly,
industry is not your industry per se, but like Google is stressing everybody out.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's click-through rates are down.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask about, because obviously we're just talking about employees and how do you find employees, but you're kind of in a unique situation where it's kind of flipped. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you hiring folks for the floor, it's not so difficult. Hiring folks for the dev team, for the software development, is a little difficult. So kind of bring me through your HR wins and worries, so to speak.
Yeah, it hasn't been hard for us to find people. I think we maybe pay more than average. Oh, we do pay more than average. And it's
you're in
not,
Utah.
Yeah. So and we're not that big, we've got 50 people. So it's not like we need to replenish a 2,000 person labor force. That would be different. But we've been lucky that we've been able to be very selective. We'll post a job ad and get 20 applicants overnight and turn it back off. Right.
Yeah.
And then we'll filter through those. And then when we get people, we keep them. We have all our own training in-house. From everything from, we've got a full-time person who just works on our training content.
Really?
So we got sort of a certification for everything. And when someone gets certified in a piece of equipment, we present it in a company-wide meeting and everybody claps. And so we built this kind of internal training structure we're pretty proud of. And it's worked pretty well so far.
So that dedicated trainer. So who is that, and how did you develop that position?
Yeah, it's kind of like a content creation position. So he'll go out and work on the floor, understand. We're building the SOPs for all the different operations. And then we build training modules that includes course room work, safety training work, and then of course job shadowing, and then hands-on under supervision, and finally just total hours on the job. And there's some competency elements in there as well.
See, that's a huge deal because, in your situation, it could be, a different business approach would be, well, I can just hire anybody and put them on a machine. I'm giving them the entire program. It's a touch interface. There's no manual calculation on the floor. I don't need to train this person, but you didn't take that approach. So that's long-term.
I mean, some of it,
there.
like running the press brake, there's stuff you got to know. But it's definitely, you're not like, it's not like it used to be for sure with the new machines.
How did you get your metal fabricating education? Kind of hands-on, just doing it?
I will say right now that I probably don't know as much about metal fab as any of the guys here at the conference. And we pick stuff up as we go. And a lot of the stuff, like the math behind bend deduction, is, very intuitive.
Right.
And that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, we just picked it up as we've gone.
Yeah, no.
For better or worse.
Would you describe yourself as a kind of a process-oriented person?
Yes.
Talking to you, it comes across.
He's a systems thinker.
Yeah,
systems thinker.
Definitely. What's
the old joke with it? Like the Simpsons in my head is like, meow, 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 meow.
But what's great though when I first saw your simulation with the bends, what a great communication tool, because you wouldn't believe the number of readers who call me and say, there's no radius in this print. There's or they have machine tolerance because they didn't flip the switch on SolidWorks to make it, So do you want this to 1,000s? Really? The material tolerance isn't that.
So,
what the heck?
I asked that question earlier about customers because you have some big time, like, important names that are working with you now. Is that fair to say? And they're kind of treated the same way, are they not?
They are, and there's an ongoing effort to overhaul our systems so we can better support B2B processes. In fact, we've said this a lot, but engineers love us.
Right.
Purchasing departments hate us.
Okay.
Because they're like, what do you mean I have to get on and like configure this part on your website? I just want to send a PO, right?
Right.
And that's actually totally reasonable. Mm-hmm. It's just not what we had in mind when we started, but it's where we got to go. But like, okay, an engineer at IBM submitted a part and we sent it to. That doesn't mean we're like a contract manufacturer for IBM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
in all humility, we're not that cool.
I just like the idea that, like, the thing that we always hear is, frustrations and trying to get things right on the front end. And here you're actually having the customer kind of do some of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
we just
people of all
short-circuit
sizes
that.
too.
Yeah.
To me, it's a very democratization of effort that the fabricator doesn't have to take on.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, that was the motivation, right? Is we started offering bending and we kept getting stuff we couldn't make. Like, hey, we got to fix this because it's just way too much work. And it's different if you're going to make 100,000 of a part.
Right.
You can spend all the time you want getting that dialed in, building a relationship with the customer. But if instead you're doing one each,
Yeah.
of 100,000 parts, then all of a sudden you got to streamline that.
That's where you're talking about waste elimination.
Right.
And, forever we've written about shop floor stuff, but it's fair to say I think Tim's kind of been more aware of it maybe than myself, but just the waste that's available on the front end of the whole thing.
Well, we heard here at the conference. It takes at one of the vendor presentations a very large fabricator stood up and say, "Hey, listen, it costs me thousands. It costs the OEM thousands to change a design.
Yeah,
they can't. We have to figure out to this print to make it." But then I step back from the outside. Why? All right, why? I mean, okay, maybe there are legal liabilities, but there's some waste in the system to say, listen, it's to start at the machine tool and work back and go, hey, this is what can be made. Let's make based on what can be made. And, there's so much. I mean, now granted, there are some shops out there that I visit, they love it. They love the challenge. And, I call them artistic fab shops, even though they're not artistic, but you see them.
Oh, they're craftspeople.
They're really, they're craftspeople. And they're doing
I admire those shops so much because I actually cannot do that. I'm actually embarrassed to admit that I'm not good actually at building stuff,
Yeah.
I enjoy designing stuff and I enjoy writing software and I enjoy producing the physical product, but some of the stuff that these shops figure out how to do is just so
I think that's kind of the beauty of the industry. There's room for a lot of different type of people. Todd Ludlow.
Yeah.
I mean, he operated a laser, but that dude's a sales machine.
Right. But I think once this, and it's so great that that's why we want to kind of spread the word of this kind of your kind of operation, because it shows everybody, hey, guess what? If you design to spec for a shop, this is what can happen. And so is the reason you're having to bend over backwards to design to this almost impossible spec, what's the reason behind it? Is it bureaucracy? Is it just the structure of the company? Or is it a safety factor? Okay, if it's for real, okay, that's a market need that needs to be met, and we need those kind of craftspeople. But there's a lot of stuff that's like, well, it's just inertia. And it's like,
it's just like a solar panel bracket. It could be a 16th of an inch off and it wouldn't matter, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, at a minimum, so it's so much work for everybody. It's hard for the customer. It's a bad experience for an engineer, because an engineer's got 1,000 knobs to tweak, and they're just trying to figure out what the design parameters are. So they reach out to a shop and ask a few questions, and the shop's like, well, what do you want? And the engineer's like, what can I want? What are the options here? And the shop's just like, man, I got to get this other order out the door. So it's frustrating for everybody. At a minimum, shops ought to be publishing specs on their tooling.
Yeah.
Put the DXF profile of your tools on there, include the bend charts that are in the catalog for the tool manufacturer. At a minimum, that can just hugely improve that workflow.
Just to jump back, just in terms of keywords you use for Google, are you going beyond simple laser cutting stainless steel? Or are you laser cutting stainless steel and the type of steel, and then for aerospace, and how long does that keyword get?
So the way Google works now is they want to own more and more about how your keywords are optimized.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of manual stuff, and they're disincentivizing it like crazy. So it's kind of like we have general keywords and we let Google expand on those.
Oh, okay.
And combinations that work, it runs.
Okay.
And the bidding's automated too. Which is all great until your costs double and you're like, why? And they're like, oh, it's competitive. And we're like, yeah, I'm sure that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is interesting because I've talked to engineers at OEMs who've calling us, and they called us and asked us about, all right, could this be made, et cetera, and I kind of give them the rundown of it's like, well, it depends on what kind of machine tools are in your area. So go to your fab shops and say, if there are a lot of these kind of press brakes, or if this, if only one shop in your whole area has a panel bender, and you have a very thin, very short flange that can only be made by a panel bender, maybe you want to extend that out. They're trying to mitigate risk on their end. And if the more they know about what can be manufactured, then the less friction there'll be. And it'll be an easier experience for them. And so it just is, so they don't get locked into a specific machine, specific fabs. They want to mitigate risk on their end.
Yeah.
And you're meeting them halfway by just opening your books and saying, hey, this is exactly what we have. And I think it's a great thing.
So what do you think made you successful in developing your own software for this industry? Because I asked that question with the knowledge that you had said earlier during a panel discussion we had here at the FMA annual meeting about the difficulty, not so much in finding people, and we covered that. You have a great training program, people like being there, but actual engineers, and you not getting a feel for just how much they might be able to do. So to me, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think luck's a big part of it, is for getting the best people, and really, truly. So our CTO. So at first it was just me writing software, which is actually a good combination if your CEO is also the machine operator and the programmer and the and the sales guy, right?
Yeah.
You know what the problem is. You have the word I use is proximity. But the closer you are to the problem, the easier it is to fix. You can build a perfect tool, and that's just that combination. Not everybody can do that, and I understand that. But the closer you can get to the problems, the better. And that's why our software, people have asked if we're going to sell it. Well, no, we're not. And it's because it's great for us, and you wouldn't like it probably. Right. Because it's not going to fit your workflows and
I think that your people kind of experience that.
But there'd be some like literally unusable. Like I can't use this software because it only does this, right? And that's why software vendors, like when you buy software, you're going to feel like it's not as good a fit,
right?
And that's because they have to support every shop.
Yeah.
So, and that's okay because you also don't have to hire a bunch of software developers that are extremely expensive, and that's a whole skill set of its own, right? So there's balance in there.
Right. And trying to hire that is, yes, it's almost I can only imagine but you have 5 on staff now, right?
Yeah, well, that includes some contractors that we are finishing up with this month. So that'll cut us down to 3 full-time devs.
Wow. Okay. Now you had mentioned also about also expanding your current platform to, you mentioned ERP, but to be a bit more like a traditional ERP with inventory management, BOMs. So kind of bring me through that progression and what's coming up in the next few months.
Yeah. So the inventory system we've had for a while. The difference is we've tied finished goods into that system. We used it to manage raw materials inventory, and that's all. And now when we finish production, even work in process is in that inventory system, so we can put locations on it and do adjustments if needed and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I was talking about this earlier, but when we first started, we didn't have a ton of knowledge about what normal business workflows look like. We understood the word PO, but not really, you know. And now we understand it very well. And we know how it's supposed to be and why. Like, a PO is a legal document. It means something to a vendor. It's an expression of intent. And it actually matters a lot, especially to big companies that have, internal controls and stuff. Right. And I get that now. But, when we first started, we were like, we're going to take orders. So we're going to build an order table in the database. And we kind of used that one table to serve the purpose of receipts and sales acknowledgments and purchase order. But they're different documents that mean different things. They hit the general ledger in different ways. So we're overhauling all those systems basically from scratch and gutting our existing tools and replacing them with ERP-friendly stuff. And it's a big job, but it's going to set us up to be able to serve our customers better.
So describe how will the experience be different now? So in other words, obviously they'll be able to have PO basically. Yeah.
It's a secret. No, just kidding.
Well, you'll have to order parts and find
so we're going to add tools that are actually pretty common industry-wide, I think. So it's not that revolutionary, but I don't know if you've ever used McMaster-Carr. There's this. It's really nice for us when we buy our red materials from McMaster-Carr, copper and brass.
Yeah.
And it's really nice just to punch in a part number and a quantity. It pulls it up, and on one page, you just fill out a PO, you give it a number, and you submit it. Or they'll take a PDF PO, right? Which is great. And that's really convenient. So we're gonna have something similar. Customers, say the engineer, will be able to save a part with a unique part number, and then they can hand that off to purchasing. They send a PO, and we know what to make, and we know. So it'll all be streamlined into our existing system, but a purchasing department will be able to do what they need to do.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if you could talk about, I've talked about this at the conference, but, several years ago, I visited 24/7 Taylor Steel, which is in the Netherlands and Germany. I actually referenced them in the first article I wrote about you guys, because when I saw you guys, they came to mind immediately, because it's basically the same business model, just the European market, and they've scaled up. They have dozens of lasers, dozens of automatic tool change press brakes, and tube laser cutting now. So they have a lot of tube lasers. Are buying ridiculous numbers.
Like 5 or 6 of them.
Well, they're buying 2 a month or something like that. It's insane. Wow. It's like, from what I hear, that's I don't know. That's hearsay.
Need to get back over there. You might want to pay for a trip.
That's right. But they're growing like a weed, but they're cut and bend. And we've asked Carl. I was like, well, aren't your customers asking for welding, asking for, and it's a different market over there. It's a different kind of supply chain over there because of the size of manufacturers there and the skill sets that are in each link in the chain. Mm-hmm. But kind of describe what your customers have been asking for and kind of the future plans to maybe add some extra services or the challenges therein.
Yeah. So a huge percentage of our customers just want finished stuff. They want us to solve their supply chain problems. And I mean, it works out that we're pretty good at what we do and not great at anything we haven't optimized for, right? I mean, we shipped out like 120 orders yesterday. I was actually obsessing over the calendar, like looking at real distraction, but yet they emptied the calendar. It was so impressive. But we can't do that if we've got all this sideways stuff that doesn't just flow. Right. You're trying to swim against the current. So how do you add that? Well, welding's a real challenge, because like quoting fit up and jigs and everything else is really hard. Making sure that handles right. We piloted some production style jobs with customers into last year and found out, there's some employee turnover on their end and on our end, mass confusion. We were trying to provide design support, which we don't have processes for, confusion about file versions. And so at the end of the day, we would love to just solve their supply chain challenges and to have them send an assembly and say, yeah, we can make that, and have the experience be the same as it is when they enter our really narrow service offering that we have right now. And that's the big challenge, is how do you get really good at so much stuff? Yeah. Because you can't be really good at everything. Right. We are really good at this like high mix flowing stuff, but we don't do aerospace. We don't do government contracting at all. Yeah.
You've recently added tube laser cutting.
So we added
that's been
cutting.
A little bit more of a not as quite as big as a conundrum as maybe the welding piece of it.
Yeah, well, you can upload a 3D model of a tube, and our system says, oh, it could be this profile or this profile, and then the customer can pick which one. And we actually are about to launch. We're really excited about this, but some parts can be made on a tube, or think about like a U-channel type thing. Right. And the cool thing about that is like, you got to have a bend radius, right? Well, not an extruded aluminum on a tube. So if you want a really sharp angle with basically no flange, we can actually do that on aluminum tube. And if there is a radius on it, we can actually choose. Our system can say we can make this out of that tube or that sheet metal, and you get to choose, right? It's just so cool, this stuff. And that's nice because it's all in system. It doesn't take a human to look at that and say yes, because we're running DFM for tube and sheet metal simultaneously, and that's what we use to choose which technology to bid on.
Yeah, that's huge to be able, especially because, they say, well, tube costs, we can't do that. But of course, but then how hard it is to bend this? So the material's more expensive.
You got a bunch of cutouts right where the die is, and that it's going to deform weird. And
exactly. Yeah. Yes, but of course, tube lasers have been sold for years. Their unique ability to create self-fixturing designs and all these value adds that can make assembly easier for the OEM and customer. So how do you have plans to integrate that as far as more, like if you can upload a very complex profile that would actually,
and say, okay, we'll cut the tube here. And,
right.
There's software like that. Trump has a plugin to SolidWorks that does all that. You can say, hey, put a 90 on here, and they're like, all right, I need to cut it like this. Right. And then you can just fold it. And that's awesome, except for it's software we have access to and the customer doesn't.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right.
That's kind of turning the tables.
Ideally, you get that customer facing one day. And that's what I think is I hope the industry is headed that way, and the fact that get this toward customer facing, self-service to a certain point, so that when it does reach the engineer in this industry, they're not. I mean, everybody here at this conference said we need more engineers. We need more engineers. But they're often just redrawing files.
Correct.
And it's like, did you go and get your 4 years of advanced, and they're just clicking and they're bored out of their minds, doing the stuff that, it's like, hey, and to actually push that back on the customer and say, all right, and then we can bring, and maybe not.
And it's not really pushing back a lot of time-consuming effort with the tools they now have, if done correctly.
Right, because you've automated that.
There's a reason it ended up in the laps of fabricators. They didn't want to do it. Right. But, I mean, if given the ability to kind of, ideally the customer benefits too, because if everything's moving smoothly through your shop, you're not having to worry about, building in more margin to cover all the insanity that goes with typically ordering metal parts without the overheads tools to kind of weed out material issues or DFM concerns.
One hot topic here, people have been asking me about product configuration, because back in the day, product configurators were, I would interview software people, and then they say, well, off the record, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I want black casters. Yes.
And, with the new tools we have, the AI buzzwords going around, they're going, no, wait a minute now, these things, we have conversational language. These configurators can really be boosted up, and we were just chatting offline about NEMA enclosures, let's say. So just kind of describe your ideas. I mean, this is nothing that's real yet, but just kind of what's the potential out there for this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, whatever the product, what you need at the end of the day is production-ready files that can be pushed into a production pipeline and manufactured. And our goal is to continuously widen that pipeline. We just added tube cutting. We've expanded our bend. We just spent like $250,000 on new punches and dies to expand our press brake capabilities. So we widen that pipeline, and we automate it like crazy. And we get a bunch of skilled workers in there that know how to do the job. And then you just figure out ways to inject stuff in the pipeline. Now we have an instant quoting front end that exposes DFM and other stuff, and that's our sole source, right? Everything flows in through that, but there's so many things you could do, and it's purely a function of time and attention, of course, capability as well. But what if you could get online and say, hey, I want an electrical box, and I want it this wide and this tall and this deep, and I want louvers right here with hardware inserted so I can mount a PC fan right there to evacuate air. I want this filter thing. I want this back plate with this DXF cut out. And there's no reason that we couldn't render that online, show exactly what it is, put a price on it, and then when they submit, convert that all into stuff that our system knows how to produce in that production pipeline. For whatever the industry, right? You can't just take an assembly and bid on it necessarily just from nothing. Jason Ray was saying that someone uploaded a Cessna into it, like a full Cessna, like a whole assembly, and like brought their systems to its needs. And they figured out how to fix it. It's just so funny, but you can't bid on a Cessna, right?
Right.
But conceivably, a kit plane company could figure out how to build a configurator that their production pipeline knows how to use.
You're describing this, and I'm thinking of stuff like trailers. You know what I mean? There's a certain consistency to the flatbed trailer you might tow behind a truck. And
right. Yeah. And up until now, the traditional product configurator is basic parametric programming, but it was just based on X, Y, and Z, and you can make it bigger, smaller, here, this here. But with the new analytical tools we have and AI, the sandbox is so much bigger.
Yeah, you need stuff on the back end to take that configured product and convert it into production files.
Right.
So that's where we actually have our own internal file format that we use that deconstructs a sheet metal part into a series of planes and bends, and our system knows how to play with that, and it's 100% reliable. If it's in our system, we can make it. And that it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I also wanted to backtrack too. Some great takeaways when I've for our readers especially, they're curious about your remnant process. Like you use every remnant under the sun. It doesn't matter. And so just describe how you make that cost effective, how you organize it so that you're not going through a huge pile, and it costs you more to use up a little bit of material rather than just scrapping it. So
Yeah, a great question. In fact, we used to do that. The inventory system that we have now is one of the first things that we built because it was basically a crisis. Because we're doing on-demand stuff, you get an order for a little washer, right? And you're putting that on a same day lead, and you're putting that on like a 120 inch by 60 inch sheet. So you've got these remainders you've created. And I remember walking out on the floor and like, flipping through stuff. I swear I have some 16 gauge in here. I finally find it and find out it's just scratched all to pieces because,
right.
Hanger rash, right? It just gets scratched sitting around. So anyway, what we ended up doing is we built vertical storage shelves. All of our remainders are on vertical shelves, and every piece of metal has a label on it that's traceable back to the PO. And we used to hand fill those labels. Part of the job for the laser operator was, hey, when you finish, measure the rim, fill out a label, scan into the system, punch in the details again.
Oh, wow.
Everyone hated it.
I was about to say, yeah.
I hated it. So we would get these piles of remainders on a table and then just try to do it at the end of the day. Wouldn't recommend it. In the end, we automated all of it. So when you receive against a PO, it prints the label. When you denest, pull stuff off the deck of the laser, it identifies the remainders because it's our post. So we know the rectangular areas that we can stock. It identifies those. It punches their dimensions in. They click a button. It prints a label. It does the inventory. And then we have an app we call the Easy Inventory app, which is it's got a big TV above the remainder storage shelves with QR codes on it. And you scan the QR codes to tell it what to do. I'm going to store this sheet. So you store the inventory location, scan the remainder, and now the system knows this piece of metal is right there. And it works really well, and it's also kind of self-correcting because if anything is wrong, it gets discovered when our system nests something on a remainder that's not there. And it frustrates everybody, so it kind of manages itself because nobody wants to have an inventory miss. So it ends up working pretty well, and it allows us to be pretty efficient.
Yeah.
And also want to get into your maintenance regimen because, again, it's about the flow of the pipeline. And if you have a machine down and you're getting out hundreds of orders a day, that's an issue. So how do you bake that in so that you're never pushing beyond that capacity, unrealistic capacity?
Yeah. So first of all, something is always broken. I mean, we use software called MaintainX, and we've set up a work order system, and every operator console, they have a MaintainX tab open. We're switching away from that to our own internal system for a variety of reasons. One of them being cost, but it says, hey, here's the maintenance you do daily. Here's the maintenance you do per shift. Here's per week. Here's per month. And we're insistent that it gets done. So everything from cleaning to lubing to, replacing consumables, all that kind of stuff. They're really important. The other piece is we have to have extra capacity. So we used to have one big deburring machine, and they're high wear machines, and they break. And then when they break and stop the pipe, it's a big deal. So we bought another one. Each of these things is worth more than my house. We bought an extra one because we just couldn't afford to be down. Now we just bought our third flatbed laser, and that's like the magic number because with 3 flatbeds and 2 shifts, if one goes down, you can add a swing and maintain laser capacity. So that was this year in January, we hit that, and it's a big milestone. We're really happy about it. And now we've got 1 tube laser. So we're like, well, we're going to buy another one. We know we will because that sucker's going to break someday and it's going to stop the pipe. So
Right. And, a lot of fab shops I know, they don't want to go over 80% because if they go over 80%, they know that something's going to go wrong. And then the variability is there. It's high mix. Something's going to, you can't run more than 80% without, it's the highway metaphor. It's you got to tap on the brakes and then everything slows down and then you're late with hundreds of jobs.
So do you outsource it all?
We outsource powder.
Okay.
Yep.
So works okay for you?
Yeah. It's funny. One of the co-founders of OSH Cut founded Great Basin Powder Coating, and he's a software guy. So they have APIs. So our system talks to their system.
Get out of here.
And they provide the price, and it goes right to our front end. And then when we go to book a job, we actually do it in their platform. Our system books it automatically in theirs. Yeah,
that's kind of sweet.
Do you do any DFM on powder? Like, hey, this is easier to hang, or you're going to have some masking issues here, that kind of things?
Yeah, so masking issues, not yet. We do hang checks, though. Wow. So our our brilliant CTO figured out a way to check and figure out whether there are features it can hang on. It could be a hook, it could be a hole, and then there's just size and weight limits as well.
Wow.
That's great.
You're going to be getting a call from Products Finishing Magazine, my good friends over there.
That's right.
Shout out to Gardner Media.
That's a huge issue because it's like, you have this huge fiber laser in the front end. And then, I visited a shop last year. I forget what it was, but it was, then they had, what was that pile of parts over there? It was a masking issue. And they didn't, it was just one of those things where they thought they could, it didn't look, and it just slipped through the cracks.
It really is the issue we're talking about, is like trying to avoid that type of mishap on the shop floor by answering all those questions on the front end.
Yeah, it is a real challenge to produce a bunch of parts and do a bunch of work and find out at the end of the chain that you can't do it. That's sometimes stuff slips through our system too. Right. And, for some reason, this bent part, and we identify those and try to fix them when they happen. But it's frustrating for everybody when something gets so far down the pipe and we just.
So any other former founders of OSH Cut that are into welding? That's right. Might want to do their own shop.
Well, my brother is actually a great welder.
Okay.
Really good at it. So
you're going to get there eventually.
Yeah. I mean, we did some welding last year on these pilot production jobs. But, we found we just released our bill of materials system that generalizes our production capabilities within the pipeline and everything else. So it's not quite there yet, but we're really close.
When you're looking and dealing with your powder coating partner, obviously the welder is going to be in house. Do you have hesitation working with someone else as an outsourced partner that you don't have this type of relationship with?
Yeah, and it really does. I mean, we're an on-demand shop, which we need to be fast, we need to be agile, and it's actually not great if a powder job gets delayed 10 days and we were supposed to deliver in 3. It's just. So it is a pretty high trust thing, and the shop's really got to be dialed in for us to be able to plug them into our pipeline. And that exposes a lot of the challenge too, is we want to do so much, and there's this idea, well, you could acquire and to get that in, but we still got to write software to tie it into our systems. We still got to make sure it's dialed in, and it is a hard problem, and we're working really hard.
It just feels like scaling is going to have to be organic.
Yeah, well, I liken it. This is maybe a silly analogy, but it's like an aluminum foil ball. Like at first, you're adding layers and it builds up fast, but the bigger it gets, the slower it seems. But you're adding layer by layer, and over a course of years, all of a sudden you look back and you say, hey, I'll be in this industry for the next 25 years before I retire. And we've been in business 5, and I just look at the next 25 and I think, oh man, I'm so excited by what we can do in 25 years. Right. But it's also frustrating because I'm like, this is what we could be doing. This is the value we could provide our customers, and we're not where we want to be yet.
Do you feel a little awkward sometimes? Like particularly at the FMA annual meeting.
I feel awkward all the time.
Wait till you hear the context of this question. So we had, I look at you, and a lot of people wanted to talk to you here. We had, a CEO of a multi-site, Cadrex, who has a facility down in Mexico. Eventually will be international, and kind of like just want to chat with you, like how you're doing things. Do you find yourself? Are you comfortable with that kind of positioning? Is like, wow, you're doing something neat, kind of different. Do you feel like you're doing something very different? I guess that's another way to put this question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I tend to see our shortcomings, I see the look on somebody's face when we tell them we can't accept a print.
Oh.
And I feel that too, and we want to fix that and make it better. I think we're doing some cool stuff, and I think it's a particular niche, but there's so much more, and that I'm just hoping that we can get into it.
The reason I asked that question, we had a young man who worked for a small shop where it's Bogger Services, and the whole point of the interview was kind of saying, how did this guy who was thought he was going to do the 4-year college plan, found out it wasn't for him, and ended up working for the family friend that owned this company. 22 years old, didn't know how to read a tape measure when he first started, Now he's managing people, and he literally left here. Was like, "Thanks for having me. I'm off to save manufacturing now."
Yeah, right. But it was very reluctant.
That's right. It's exciting to see. I mean, geez, man, I say the phrase "younger people," but I'm post 50, so
kids.
But I'm just saying, like, there's a new perspective that comes in, and I don't think that's really age related, but it's kind of interesting to see people look at the way things are done and kind of applying their skill set to make it a little bit more efficient.
Yeah. Well, I think people really appreciate your humility. You come across as genuine.
I work hard to seem humble.
I
really
I think a lot do.
Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. But
Wow, I think we're going to have karaoke time.
There you go. And that's a key part of this industry, why I like covering it so much, because you've got, some of the best people at this conference have that humility of, hey, I don't have all the answers. That's why I'm here. And, we can, work, when we work together, we can come up with a better solution. And everybody's facing similar problems. Yeah. And, the engineering aspect being the chief among them now. I mean, who knew, like 10 years ago, be like, I need more engineers. Wouldn't have happened because it was all, but now the knowledge of sheet metal is not being proliferated as much. And that's another thing I appreciate about your software is it literally visually tells people, and it's in the language that young engineers can understand who've never been trained in sheet metal and don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the first times I ever emailed you, Tim, I was like, I think sheet metal has kind of an image problem because all these other technologies seem so interesting, like 3D printing. It was the big buzzword, and CNC machining is a big one, and then sheet metal. It's like, man, everything's made out of sheet metal, and nobody wants to make anything out of sheet metal. Like engineers come out of college thinking, well, why would I want to design anything in sheet metal? Well, it's because pound for pound, and it's cheaper and it's strong and it's a really good way to make stuff.
I think it literally became an issue of like, wow, we can do this a different way. And for many years, it was never really looked upon as that.
We have so many customers who have told us, and they just come out of the woodwork. They're like, hey, you changed everything about how our engineers design.
Yeah.
We had one customer the other day and said, hey, can we get like a desktop version of your quoting app so that we can use it for DFM before we upload?
Wow.
And it's just, once people understand what you can do with fabricated metal, it changes everything. And that's why, I'm excited about what we're doing, but I'm excited to see what's happening elsewhere in the industry too. As technology advances, it makes this kind of stuff more accessible. I think it's going to be a lift for the whole industry, and it's going to be good. We'll see more product being produced by more companies. We'll see people solving problems that couldn't be solved before, literally. And, the pace of change and acceleration and innovation is just going to accelerate. And we're just kind of a tiny piece of that puzzle, but it still feels really exciting.
I honestly think that's a portion of the industry's growth over the last, particularly 20 years. It's not all it's not all reshoring. I mean, there's this element of people finding new ways to make parts.
Oh yeah, the pie is getting bigger.
The pie is getting bigger. And it's funny when people ask me what I do. It's first, I write about sheet metal fab, and usually how I describe it is I just point to some sheet metal part that's usually in the room or like in the elevator. See, this is all sheet metal. Oh, I didn't even know.
those metal birds that fly around and take surveillance of us.
That's right.
Well, Caleb, you said you're just a tiny piece, but would you describe yourself as a disruptor for the industry in a good way?
That's kind of a loaded term, disruptor, but I would actually say no. We're doing something novel and new, but we're not the only company doing it. I mean, FabWorks, am I allowed to say company names in here?
Go for it.
Yeah.
FabWorks, they're a California-based company, been in business for a while, I think 10 or 15 years, longer than us, but they went out and figured out the software thing, and they do what we do.
Right.
And in some ways better, and I'll admit that. They don't do the DFM piece. That's a little harder, but their prices in a lot of cases are better than ours, and they're fast. Another big one is Send Cut Send. I think they have 3 times the number of employees we have.
Mm-hmm.
They're killing it. So there's other companies doing the same thing as us, which I'm very pleased at. And then there's work that none of us, these 3 companies I just listed, can actually do effectively, and that is, do production work in the way that companies need it, not as effectively as businesses that have been in it for a while. So if anything, I would hope that we just, get more stuff into the fabrication pipeline.
Yeah.
which everybody's going to participate in.
All right.
Would you like to ask him another hard question, Gareth?
Yeah. So you wrote a column about livable wage in the industry. Can you expound on that? Because we run, I think it's every 2 years we run
every year.
what keeps you up at night survey.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No,
And that's always in there, right?
It's
Hiring.
always the number one is.
We used to do that. We don't do it anymore.
Well,
Thanks,
we used to run a
spammers.
survey. That number one answer was finding and retaining skilled workers. And you wrote a piece about, got to rethink paying livable wages. Could you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the statistics, just even from the financial ratios survey that the FMA does, and the median wages are below living wages basically everywhere. And this is for like laser operators. This is for, forklift operators with experience. The living wage, and especially now post-COVID, all this crazy inflation, it costs a lot to live. And, our philosophy is, hey, we want permanence. We want people to come in and get really good at what they do and stick around. And there's no reasonable way to expect that that's going to happen at all if you're not paying a living wage, because they'll go somewhere else. They'll have to.
Right.
And if they don't go somewhere else, maybe their partner's also working, and their kids are in daycare, which just exposes another massive cost.
That's
to
insane.
Yeah,
nowadays.
it's really expensive. So we thought, hey, we've got to at least hit the living wage mark. So we kind of have a minimum pay that scales with time, and then growth beyond that, in leadership and stuff adds to that. But that, I think, has helped us a lot. I'm also sensitive to the fact that, it's not like there's a lot of money to throw around. But, I would suggest that, we live and work in an environment, and there's always constraints that affect how we do business. If a constraint is what you have to pay people, you will figure out a way to stay in business, paying your people what they need. You will. Like, fabricators are smart.
Yeah.
These companies have been around for a long time, solving really hard problems. If you have to pay your people more, you'll figure it out. There's automation. There's software tools that can help things. Maybe you have to pursue other markets where the margin aren't as tight and as competitive. Maybe you can identify a niche. And it's hard, but it's possible. It is. So
Definitely.
Those are the only questions I have.
Would you like to rest your case?
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Caleb. It's a pleasure talking
It's a
with
pleasure.
you.
I've been, watching, listening to this podcast, and I was really pleased for the invitation. So thank you.
So, thanks for joining us today. Be sure and send us a note, complaint, criticisms to FMA. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
Podcast at FMAMFG.org. One more time. Podcast at FMAMFG.org. Let us know what you think, and maybe we'll send you a t-shirt, or hell, if you want a t-shirt, just ask us.
Right.
And stickers. And be sure and tell your friends about the Fabricator Podcast. It is available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, and goodbye.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited with the help of Brandon Geyer. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Dana Weicker, Mary Diamond, Mike Owens, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.